Chinese tech giant Huawei pays out $9.6 billion to current and former employees. All right, friends and comrades, welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. Today we're going to be talking about the evil, insidious data-stealing corporation Huawei. I've got this right here for you guys. This is a tweet from Starboy. Says China's employee-owned Huawei paid $9.65 billion in dividends to 131,507 current and former staff, an average of $75,000 each. Yeah. Huawei, the evil giant tech company that essentially functions as spies for the Chinese Communist Party, just paid out $75,000 on average to each one of its employees. Yeah, that's an evil company, huh? You know, we hear a lot of things about Huawei. It's been in the news intermediately, I suppose, at least since, I believe it was under the Trump administration. Drop a comment, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been, in and out of the news somewhat frequently, at least since the Trump administration, when I think they banned the sale, or I can't even remember now, it's been so long, but they banned the sale or the exchange or some sort of operating system involving Huawei here in the United States I believe it was under the premise that the company Huawei was mining your data and then shipping it back to the Chinese Communist Party, like some giant fucking huge Cold War conspiracy, right? So, Huawei's been in and out of the news since then. And, there's been a lot of debate amongst, I guess, the online left book. I mean, even different scholars, intellectuals, this and that, about what kind of company is Huawei. I've heard it referred to as an ESOP, which is what, an employee, share operating service or something, where employees in a company can buy stakes in their company, but generally they don't have voting rights, but they get the value of the stock. If the company stock goes up, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. I've heard told that it's just a private enterprise, that it's secretly a state-owned enterprise. Obviously there's people like myself who have called it a co-op, a form of workers' co-op at least. So I figured we'd make a video in light of this, tweet that I stumbled across, kind of talking about some of the inner workings of Huawei. How does it work? How does the governance of it work? How does the profit sharing work? And what we should, when we have a conversation about Huawei, how should we classify it? So while I was doing research for this video, I found this right here. This is an excerpt, the first page of a huge, I guess you call it a research essay or a thesis essay from, Toshio Goto from the Japan University of Economics. I believe he's a professor there. So this was a really big paper that came out. It's about 30 pages long, and I dug through it and screenshotted it and cropped a few images for you to discuss more in depth how Huawei works. And this paper actually came out in response to a paper that was released in 2019 from Christopher and Blake or something like that, two intellectuals working here in the U.S. One of them had worked in China at a Chinese university for a while, but they came out at the height of when Huawei, right around the time that Huawei was going through the trade sanctions here in the U.S., these couple of guys came out with a paper explaining why, even though Huawei calls itself a co-op, it's technically not a co-op. And since then, there's been a whole series of papers like this. I believe the guy that wrote that former paper, he also released a video just shitting on Huawei, and not just Huawei, but other ostensibly Chinese cooperatives, explaining why they're not actually cooperatives because they have to go through the state trade union and this and that, and they don't actually own the shares. Anyway, we'll get into that more later. But so this paper that I'm going to kind of dissect for you guys was from this Japanese fellow in response to a paper that had come out in 2019 explaining why it wasn't a co-op, This paper and others that I read as well kind of counter that narrative and explain why, even though there's some weird legal loopholes that might sound a little bit fishy or weird if you just take them at a cursory analysis, when you dig a little deeper, it actually shows the ways in which employee ownership and employee management of the company works. All right, let's see what we got here. I apologize ahead of time. The print on this is a little bit small, so I might do a little tripping over my words here and stuff. So, title of the essay here says, Huawei's employee sharing scheme. Who owns Huawei? Says this paper aims to empirically analyze Huawei's employee shareholding scheme behind its rapid growth to make it the leading Chinese communication manufacturer, with particular focus on its governance aspect, which the literature has not revealed in depth. With the research question as who owns Huawei, it sheds light on the background and mechanisms of the firm's employee shareholding scheme and its role in the firm's governance, drawing on publicly available sources including corporate databases, the preceding literature, information provided by Huawei upon request whenever necessary. So this here that I'm going to lay out for you guys is like a five tiered, very brief explanation as to how the company works, and we'll dive in a little bit deeper as we go along with some more details or a little more nuance, okay? The first one here says, Huawei Technologies is wholly owned in its holding company named Huawei Investment and Holding, which implements an employee shareholding scheme through its trade union and is owned approximately 99% of the share by employees. Number two, as stipulated by the regulations, the firm concentrates all employee shares into its trade union. Under the restriction from issuing regular stock to its employees, the shares held by the employees are designed as phantom stocks, which come with shareholder rights, including dividends, voting, and property rights, as articulated in the company law of the People's Republic of China. Number three here. Employee stocks are legally registered in the name of the Huawei Investment and Holding Company, Ltd. Trade Union Commission, but are effectively owned by employees and controlled separately from the assets of the trade union. Number four, Huawei's highest decision-making body is the Employee Shareholders Representative Commission, which represents the employee shareholders and exercises their rights through the elected representatives. The employee shareholders vote one vote per share, and representatives vote one vote per person. Although Ren Zhengfei, as the founder, has a veto, its exercise is limited to the extent specified by internal regulations. Number five, based upon the above findings, this paper concludes that Huawei is owned and controlled by its employees, despite the fact that their stocks are registered in the name of the firm's trade union, which is not only made public, but also internally disseminated and practiced, and rejects such a claim that Huawei is owned by its trade union or is effectively state-owned. All right, so that's quite a mouthful and a lot of reading. I apologize. Here, let me get a little drink coffee. All right, so I know that's a lot of reading. I'm going to distill it down for you real quick, and then we'll do a little more reading, all right? So essentially how Huawei works is, in the People's Republic of China, they have very strict regulations for private companies, for how an LTD works, how an LLC works, how all the different forms of corporation work, right? They have all these regulations. Okay. So Huawei Holding Company is listed as an LTD, and then underneath it, it's the holding company. Underneath it, there's a bunch of little subsidiaries. Like, so Huawei, you probably know it as making phones, but they also make all kinds of tech-related stuff. Telecommunication systems, servers. I think I read an article recently where they supplied the solar panels for, like, the biggest green energy steel factory in the world. That's a lot of fucking solar panels. You can imagine the amount of solar panels, or rather the amount of energy those solar panels would have to garner in order to fucking melt steel. Pretty crazy. So Huawei does all this different stuff. So they have LLCs underneath it, right? The problem with LLCs, even underneath the holding company, is company law in China has very strict regulations about divvying stocks, the amount of people that can be shareholders in an LLC. I think it can be anywhere between 2 and 50. And then after that, you have to like go up to the next bracket, pay different taxes. There's a whole nother series of regulations. And as we can see, Huawei has, over 100,000 employees, right? So the way that it works is in order to kind of flout that LLC issue and comply with Chinese regulations, Huawei has developed what's called phantom stocks, right? Where the trade union is where you go to buy and sell and administer stocks, right? So the trade union, the Huawei trade union, holds all the stocks and issues you a phantom stock. Just imagine like a little fucking ticket or something on your phone that says, I have this many votes in the election for representatives, blah, 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 right? And so the original paper that came out back in 2019 and the subsequent video where it was saying how, Huawei's not owned by the employees because there's just phantom stocks, and technically the trade union owns all of it. As it turns out, that's completely incorrect. Everyone that does have a quote-unquote phantom stock, does get to vote. They vote in their elections according to how many shares they have. They do get dividends every quarter, as we can see from the article I showed you earlier, and they do vote in the elections in order to choose a commission, and then the commission then chooses the board of directors who decide how the company runs and operates. All right, so we have that little bit of an outline here. Now I want to read to you like how the elections work and how the governing body to make decisions for the companies work, and how that relates to employee ownership. All right, I got this right here. It says, the commission members are elected by employee shareholders with voting rights in a vote of 1 vote per share, as we said. And the terms of such an appointment is 5 years. The commission members elect the directors and auditors by voting 1 vote per person, and together with the board of directors and the supervisory board, manage and monitor Huawei's important matters. So, okay. How this works is you buy your shares through the Huawei trade union. You have them however much you want to invest. I mean, you already get some just working there. You can reinvest like an ESOP. If you've ever worked for an employee shareholding program, a company that has employee shareholding, you know how that works. You can buy some stocks of the company. The company will like match 50%, 25%, whatever. You know how it works, right? So you buy your shares. That gives you your right to vote according to how many shares you've bought, right? Then you vote in an election. You'll have different people from the company that will run to be a representative on the commission, okay? It's like the first body of governance within the company, right? So if I got 100 shares, I can cast 100 votes. If you've got 10, you can vote, and we can talk a little later on how that may be unfair, maybe not the perfect example of a workers' co-op, right? So then you elect all the representatives for the commission. The commission then, one person, one vote, elects the board of directors and all the other little bureaucratic decisions. And then these two bodies together, own and operate the company, make the decisions for the company, what products to sell, where to invest, where to build a factory, blah, blah, blah. You know the drill, right? So this is how it works. We got a little bit more here. It says, as Huawei's highest decision-making body, the commission decide on important matters such as profit, distribution, capital increase, the selection of board members and auditors, and are chaired by the chairman of the board. The board of directors has the authority to engage in management strategy and business operations, and is the highest authority in terms of management strategy, business operations, etc. So like I said, to the people that are saying it's just an ESOP, a company that does employee stock sharing. The difference between an ESOP and a worker co-op is generally ESOPs when you buy shares, you don't get to vote. Most ESOPs, you get the shares, you get dividends. If you sell them, you get the full value of them, but you don't get to elect who's running the company. So even though you can buy shares, I mean, you could theoretically go and like get together with a bunch of employees who all have shares and run a huge campaign with all this levels of shit in order to collectively, sway the market by buying, whatever. It's not an actual co-op when you're an ESOP. You own stocks, but you can't vote. You don't choose the board of directors. You don't decide what's done in the company. Okay. So while Huawei uses an ESOP format for their worker cooperative, one vote per share, and you can buy shares, those shares equate to a say in the company. Okay. So at its essence, Huawei, that is still a form of worker cooperative. Now, we could have a discussion as to if that's the most egalitarian or the best method for, actually having a workers cooperative, for having workers have the most say in the company. We could have a discussion about that. But one of the nice things about this system, fusing the ESOP and the worker co-op, is it adds a level of versatility and rate of growth that is really great for helping the company grow quickly, which is why we've seen Huawei really take off in all these different tech sectors, right? Because by having the employee stock sharing system, you're encouraging the employees that are already working for you to reinvest in the company. And then, they stand to gain more material wealth if the company does well. So then, in theory, they work harder, go the extra mile, etc. Now, like I was saying, there was a paper that was released earlier and a video as well. I'll see if I can roll that for you guys. Where this guy, Christopher Balding, made the case that because the shares are held and administered through the trade union, which in China, there's a misconception that trade unions don't exist in China, okay? That they're all just either state and then municipal trade unions, which isn't accurate. You do have that. It's kind of like the overarching bureaucratic structure of the national trade union system. But workers are allowed to freely organize and associate with each other in a consensual trade union. How it works, though, is when you form a trade union, it has to be underneath the municipal and the national trade union association. Which really, it's not a direct comparison, but you could really draw parallels between the Chinese system and how it works here in the U.S. under AFL-CIO or with the National Labor Relations Board, right? It's really not that much different. I'm not super well read on this topic, so I can't give you the whole lowdown of all the details and bureaucracy, administrative, what have you, about how it works exactly. Right. So it is a freely associated trade union. Okay. It's a misconception that workers aren't allowed to organize in China. Their labor culture might be quite a bit different because you have the Communist Party and all that entails, right? But workers are still allowed to freely associate. But anyway, I'm getting off tangent here. So this Christopher Balding guy, he made the case that since it's through the trade union, which is, as I said, ostensibly underneath the umbrella of, we'll just call it the National Labor Union, that the employees don't actually own the company. But as we laid out here, that's inaccurate. I mean, you buy the shares, it might be administered under the trade union, but you have it. You get paid the dividends for it, right? You get the votes as to who's going to be your representative in the company to make decisions. When you retire the company, you sell them back to the company, and you get lump cash to do with whatever the fuck you please. If you quit, you can sell them back in the company, and there's a whole process for how the value of that is determined, despite the fact that it's not a publicly traded company, right? So this guy, Christopher Balding, makes a case that it's not a worker co-op. It's a whole fucking scam. It's actually owned by the state, by the Communist Party, and that's where we got all this hysteria that our State Department and U.S. officials, ramped up with Huawei being this evil company that's spying on you. And look, I mean, I'm sure Huawei data mines, just like, every fucking tech company on the planet does, all right? And maybe some of that does end up back to the CPC. But how is it any fucking different than it being wired to our fascist-ass Pentagon? You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. Maybe that doesn't happen. But I'm going to go ahead and assume, they say that data is the new oil, right? So I'm going to go ahead and assume Huawei, like any tech company, probably does mine data. But, they banned and put all these regulations on Huawei phones here in the U.S. under the guise of it being to stop the Communist Party from threatening our national security. But in reality, it's likely from lobbying from Samsung or domestic producers like Apple not wanting competition, because Huawei's taken off. I mean, if you go anywhere in the third world or the developing world or Asia, I mean, you don't see Apple and Samsung phones. You see Huawei generally, or some other small company over there that does phones, right? But anyway, getting off tangent here again, I want to talk about this Christopher Balding guy because there's kind of a story behind him, and it's just an example of how anytime you read something real negative about China, and I know China's not perfect, it's got its own problems. I mean, it's a government and a country. They got fucking problems, right? But anytime you have this mass hysteria around China or China bad, you start digging a little deeper, and generally you don't even have to go more than a few inches under the ground to find that there's some fucking concoction or some weird ass motherfucker that's either paid by State Department or has some vested interest in making these claims against China. So this Christopher Balding guy that kind of centered around this whole thing that inevitably led to Huawei undergoing regulations in the U.S. Christopher Balding here. Got this article right here for you. It says, "Not feeling safe in China. American academic leaves China after losing his post. Saying that China has reached a point where I do not feel safe being a professor and discussing even the economy, business, and financial markets. An American professor who lost his post at an elite Chinese university is now leaving China, citing concerns about his personal safety." Interesting, huh? So yeah, this guy, Christopher Balding, he used to teach at a university there in China, right? And he says he's a self-proclaimed libertarian, right? And he says that he was let go from the university because he was being censored, right? Because, like I said, he's a self-proclaimed libertarian, and Xi Jinping is cracking down on independent thought. From what I was reading, the university came out and said that he just wasn't doing his job very well, didn't show up for classes, wasn't publishing research how he was supposed to, so they let him go. And then he comes back, moves back to the U.S., and he starts this huge smear campaign against China. One of the things he ended up smearing was Huawei, obviously. I got another video right here. In this video, and I'm not going to play it for you because it's just him droning on for like 15 minutes. But in this video, he goes on and on about big tech and data mining and how it's a concern to our privacy and national security. And not once in the video does he talk about Apple, does he talk about Google, does he talk about any of these domestic tech giants. But he does periodically mention China, and China being a national security threat and their big data being a security threat to the U.S. Talk about a double standard, right? I got some tweets from him as well here. It says, "Maybe it isn't the fact that China is developing economically, but the fact that China is an illiberal authoritarian regime who has no respect for human rights." Got another one here. It says, "Beijing has made it clear for some time it wants to do away with the liberal international order. Continued multilateral steps towards openness and respect for human rights are dead if you accept the Chinese vision. Trump in history will be a blip. Focus on what matters." Okay, so you're getting a taste of what this guy's like here. Right, obviously, full force anti-China. Sorry, guys. I did some digging. I couldn't find anything real dirty tied to him. You know, like when we did the last video on Ukraine where this woman works for Atlantic Council, and then you go in and she's also worked for NDI and stuff like that. Some very clear conflicts of interest that kind of, whittle away at her testimony, show a pretty clear bias. I didn't find anything real nasty like that, but still, this guy, I can't shake the feeling. I can't say for sure, I'm speculating, but I can't shake the feeling that this guy has some kind of revenue stream coming in through some sort of clandestine means. I mean, the way, how this operates, man. They'll they'll give you money through an anonymous benefactor or a fake identity to publish a book or cover your research. I mean, you know how it works. There's no way I'm going to know, and none of this stuff is public, right? But the level of which he goes full anti-China, and maybe he's just a fucking crazy libertarian. That's possible too, don't get me wrong. But the level of full bore against China he goes, despite the fact that he's lived there, is disturbing, because most intellectuals you talk to that have lived there, and that's not the case with everybody. You've got people that, you know, condemn certain things about China. I mean, it's not a perfect country, like we said. But, you know, most reports you read from intellectuals and stuff say they enjoyed the experience. They were allowed to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. It really wasn't an issue, this huge censorship drive that he's making it out to be. I'm tending to lean towards the idea that he was either incompetent or he was real iconoclastic. And just, I mean, you've seen these videos here I rolled for you. Guy looks like a real douchebag. But I mean, I'll show you some of these articles here that he's published too. He's a regular contributor to Bloomberg. I got these. Every single one of them just about is about China. And I know he's a quote unquote China expert because he taught at a university there. But I'll read some of these for you guys because he just goes on and on and on. This is just 2 pages. There's like 4 or 5 of them. Says China's truth with U.S. exposes rest of the world. Trump won't be able to let China slide on trade deal. Look within for China's true growth threat. One good reason to delist Chinese companies. That's a good one. I feel like that one has spook written all over it. China's food is only going to get pricier. The dollar dictates China's need for a trade deal. China's growth story has plenty of holes. China's banks have a hidden wave of bad debt. China is strangling its private champions. Bad jobs data could bite China. I mean, obviously, it goes on and on. Then this one here, like I was talking about, China's collection of data on foreigners is a national security risk. I mean, clearly this guy, to me, he reeks of State Department stooge, but I could be wrong. I mean, he could just be a libertarian psycho, like I said. But the point I'm getting at by showing you this is, like I said, so I walked you through how China's Huawei is essentially a worker cooperative. You know, is it maybe the best form of cooperative? Would it be better to have one person, one vote? That way it's more egalitarian. The lower workers have a better say in the company. Meanwhile, they can form voting blocks and stuff like that, right? We can have a discussion about that another time. We can have a discussion about that in the comments. What you think is, Mondragon Corporation, I'm pretty sure, does one employee, one vote, for representatives by district or something like that. We can have a discussion as if that's the better way. But, I walked you through Huawei, despite the weird legal loopholes in order to go through the company law of the People's Republic of China. It's still... It's as employee-owned and worker cooperative as you can get without your fucking eyes getting wet, as old Greg would say. You own shares in a company that you can buy up, right? Those shares translate to a vote for representatives. Those representatives decide the fate of the company, right? It's like a Republican form of worker co-op. You get dividends, as we've seen in the earlier article. We can fact check that on Twitter. We can find some motherfucker that works for Huawei. When you're done working, you sell them back to the trade union and you get cash for them. It's as worker cooperative as it can get. You know what I'm saying? And, going back to the Christopher Baldwin guy, just drawing it all to a close here. Anytime you're hearing something negative about China, you got to dig a little deeper, because they have built an entire propaganda machine about hating on China, because China's the ascending power right now. Everybody sees it, not just crazy-ass internet communists like me. Wall Street guys see it too. China is growing. And not saying this guy's Pentagon finance, but the level of China hate coming out of him, my Lord, right? They've got a propaganda campaign against China. U.S. is trying to hold on to its economic and cultural hegemony by any means necessary, and that involves a huge fucking propaganda campaign to shut down defectors, to keep the illusion that the American empire is still going strong, right? So anytime you're hearing something bad about China, again, you got to look into it a little more. You're going to start finding, once you start pulling out the strings, the whole fucking shirt starts to fall apart. You know what I'm saying? But I want to do this video also because it's good discussion, and we did a video on this earlier somewhat, China's Common Prosperity Initiative and market socialism. The left is like it's torn on every other fucking issue, from war to domestic policy. In theory, left is always torn on issues, which is good to have debate and understanding. But, the left is also divided on China. Is China still communist despite all the dangest reforms? I mean, you guys know from my earlier video how I lean towards it. In my view, China is still socialist. The Communist Party is still communist. The officials in the Chinese Communist Party are still, I believe, deeply committed to implementing socialism in their own way, right? We talked about why these openings happened. China was severely underdeveloped, huge poverty crisis. They had no real means of garnering capital because they're cut off from the rest of the world. And especially after the Sino-Soviet split, that issue, that gap was made even bigger. So they opened up, with Nixon going to China and stuff, and they started allowing foreign investment under the promise that if we provide you with the cheap labor and cheap regulation, you will give us intellectual property rights, you'll give us technology, we'll, have this capital inflow so that we can develop our country. And then the idea being, with market socialism is that we will then, or Dengism is then we will use this capital to re-implement our socialist program. And we can have a discussion about that in the comments. I think that would be useful. But in my view, China still is socialist because, like I said, the Communist Party is still deeply committed to socialism. But beyond that, you still have this huge network of state-owned enterprises, which the revenue generated from it, goes to finance things like the BRI, the One Belt One Road Initiative, build schools, build airports, and more than. And then you have worker co-ops and stuff like Huawei here playing a role as well. You had Xi Jinping back in 2011 re-implemented the Mao Zedong era initiative of building cooperatives in rural areas that were really hit by poverty to, they have certain resources here, so we're going to build a cooperative to exploit those resources, ship them back out, bring capital in. They've linked all these townships and villages by rail. I mean, you had, as a part of the Common Prosperity Initiative, but prior to that, the attempt to try to lift people out of this intense rural poverty. I mean, you had the Chinese Communist Party send millions of Communist Party officials and hundreds of thousands of experts all over the country into the most rural and most remote parts. Sorry, I can't talk. Remote parts of the country to look at what they needed infrastructure, what they needed resource-wise, what did they need for infrastructure to lift these people out of poverty and to develop them and improve their material conditions. So however you feel about maybe the higher up echelon of the Communist Party, or maybe you disagree with Dengism and you think it's revisionist or whatever, fine. But one of my reasons for believing that or viewing China as still being socialist, despite all the other points I made, is the people there still view themselves as socialists. All those Communist Party members that went into the countryside to help their people, to develop the material conditions, view themselves as socialists. They view themselves as good communists. And I think, for us in the left here in the West, it's not for us to decide what we think socialism is or is not just because we've read a lot of books. In the heart of the people in the Communist Party that are doing the work, that are going to the countryside, that are doing the administration, that are planning various sectors of the economy, be it on the national level or the local, domestic, rural level, they view themselves as socialists. They view themselves as communists. They view themselves in international solidarity a lot of times with the rest of the world. And for me, that's enough. And we can have debates all day long about the national policy or state capitalism or any of this stuff. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter because they have a deep communal Marxist socialist roots in their culture. And I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon, no matter how much foreign capitalist investment they get in China. But yeah, guys, that's all I have for you. I know it was maybe a little bit all over the place. It might not have been my best video. I know it's kind of tripped over my words. I apologize for that. But I think I got the points across. I laid out, how does Huawei work? I hope maybe that was a little insightful for you guys. Some information. I mean, there's all kinds of mystery around China, It's the mysterious Orient. Oh, shit. We don't know what's going on over there, and we're lied to from every single news outlet in the world, pretty much, right, about what's going on in China. And, China has its own propaganda campaign like any country does, so you can't necessarily, trust their state media either. You can't just take it 100% at its face value. So I hope maybe this here from a research essay was a little bit insightful about how the company works and can give us a better idea at how worker cooperatives can work here as well. Drawing these lines between people that try to shut down things, try to have this slur campaign, so to speak, against China. And, a little discussion on, is China socialist or not? So, but yeah, guys, that's all I have for you. As always, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please please subscribe. If you can support me on Patreon or PayPal, I'd really appreciate it. That shit makes a huge difference. I mean, that money coming in has saved my ass on more than a few occasions when I've missed work because I've been trying to catch up on production here. So, guys, I really appreciate all the love, and as always, great hanging out with you, and I'll speak with you again soon. Bye.